Coming up this week, there are two dramatic stories, one of a miracle rescue at sea and one concerning terror-related activity where a spy is believed to have been surveilling cruise ships. There's also an astonishing report of an angry outburst from the mayor of Nice in France as he objected to Royal Caribbean's Voyager of the Sea's port call on Thursday last. There's also new vaccination requirements for a popular cruise port that you need to be aware of, cancellation cruises from NCL on two of their ships in the 2026 to 2027 season, and also a just announced very special cruise from Holland America to commemorate the 250th birthday of the United States in 2026. Welcome to the Cruise News Roundup, brought to you by the Solo Muster Drill. It's July 6th, 2025. One of the stories dominating the cruise news this week has been the dramatic situation that unfolded on the Disney Dream cruise ship on Sunday last, June 29th. The ship was en route from the Bahamas going back to Fort Lauderdale at the end of a 4-day sailing when passengers heard the emergency code Mr. MOB. That stands for Man Overboard. A little girl, reported to be either 4 or 5 years old, fell into the water from deck 4. Her father immediately jumped in after her in an effort to rescue her. Various video footage online has captured that almost miraculous outcome. The father thankfully reached his daughter and held her close as they threaded water whilst awaiting the lifeboats from the cruise ship to be launched. The rescue crew has been commended for their quick action in getting the lifeboat in the water and rescuing the girl and her father. Both are apparently doing reasonably well after their ordeal, although there have been reports that the father was briefly hospitalised later this week. There was also initially a lot of speculation and online reports suggesting that the father had placed the little girl on the railings in order to take a photo. However, towards the end of the week, this theory has been dispelled, and the most recent credible reports from eyewitnesses appear to indicate that the child's parents were nearby playing shuffleboard, and the child herself actually climbed onto the railings of the ship. An explanation of this nature appears to be supported by a midweek press statement from the Broward County Sheriff's Department, who were investigating the incident, and they stated definitively that the child was not placed on the railings or being held there. The second big story this week is of concerning reports which have emerged about an Azerbaijani national who was arrested on the Greek island of Crete on suspicion of spying for terrorism purposes. The man had been staying in a hotel overlooking Suda Bay, in particular overlooking the naval base, but the cruise port is also in proximity. When detained, he was found to have thousands of images of both the naval base and also cruise ships. Suda port is the port of choice for larger ships calling to Crete, and it's located about 8 kilometres from the nearest city of Hania, which itself is a very popular shore excursion destination. The man who was detained is suspected of having links to the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Greek authorities and security experts have expressed concern as regards the motivation and the intentions of this detained person, and there's concern that a cruise ship may have been considered a potential target for an act of terrorism. So this is clearly very concerning for anybody going to the area on a cruise ship. However, at present, Greek authorities have not issued any formal alerts to cruise lines, and the US State Department has not issued any heightened advice. The UK Foreign Office, however, has advised that visitors to Greece should be aware of the increased risk of terrorist acts, although it's not clear if this has been directly in response to this recent incident or has been applied in a more general sense. Now, just as the memory of COVID-related vaccine travel requirements has been fading, a new vaccination requirement has emerged. For those taking a Caribbean cruise with a port call in Honduras, including the ever-popular Rotan, you need to be aware that the Honduran government issued an executive agreement on June 27th declaring a national health alert. This is in response to the increased prevalence of measles worldwide. Now, the agreement is reported to have authorised the Health Ministry and Customs and Immigration authorities to begin requesting proof of vaccination or proof of a recent negative measles test for all travellers. Information on this requirement has been made available by the US State Department, although as yet there are no reports that cruise lines have actually been advising passengers of the coming into effect of this new requirement. However, if you plan on getting off the ship while in port in Honduras, it would seem prudent to consider bringing an up-to-date vaccine record with you, or alternatively bringing along evidence of a negative measles test taken 72 to 80 hours before your arrival. Taking a look now at the bizarre situation that unfolded in the south of France on Thursday last, Royal Caribbean's Voyager of the Seas, carrying 3,100 passengers, dropped anchor as it was scheduled to do in Villefranche-sur-Mer and began tendering operations for a 13-hour port call. This appears to have angered the Mayor of Nice due to the fact that since July 1st, a law has come into effect banning all cruise ships carrying more than 2,500 passengers from visiting Villefranche and also banning those carrying over 450 passengers from visiting Nice. On Thursday, the Mayor of Nice, Christian Estrosi, and he's also the president of the wider Nice-Côte d'Azur metropolitan area. Accompanied by a media crew, he boarded a police boat and headed out to sea with the apparent intention of confronting the captain of the Voyager of the seas. His attempt to board the ship in order to deliver a letter to the captain was denied, and there's footage online which shows the mayor angrily shouting towards the vessel, ordering it to leave.
I have to give you that. You are nobody here. You are nobody.
The Maritime Union of the Alpes Maritimes quickly clarified the position, releasing a statement that confirmed that the Voyager of the Seas had been in fact pre-approved to make its port call. CLIA, the Cruise Line International Association, also strongly condemned the mayor's actions, referring to the apparent illegality of those, and stating that the Mayor of Nice's attempt to board a vessel anchored in the Bay of Villefranche without prior authorisation is unlawful. In question was anchored since 6:30 a.m. at the southernmost point of the bay, in full compliance with the authorisation granted by the Alpes Maritime Prefecture. This stopover has been approved by the Nice Metropolitan Authority and has not been the subject of any objection since. Moving now to Alaska, where on Saturday there was a sad conclusion to the case of the cruiser who went missing from the Norwegian Bliss cruise ship when it was on a port of call in Juneau. The 62-year-old woman from Kentucky disembarked the ship when it arrived in the Alaskan capital on Tuesday morning, and she took the Mount Roberts tram in order to access hiking trails in the area. She failed to return on Tuesday evening by departure time, and authorities were then notified. Searches were ongoing in the following days, and unfortunately the woman's body was located on Saturday. The cause of death is not yet known, and an autopsy is to be undertaken. Turning now to the very recent news of the cancellation of scheduled itineraries on the NCL Prima and the NCL Breakaway for sailings in the 2026 to 2027 season. Norwegian Cruise Line have begun the process of initially notifying travel agents, and they will subsequently be notifying passengers on an individual basis of the cancellations. The cancellation of the scheduled itineraries is being put down to the revised deployment of the two ships. New itineraries and destinations for those ships have not yet been disclosed. Norwegian are, of course, providing a full 100% refund for all of those who have paid, and in addition they're also offering a degree of compensation for the inconvenience by way of a 10% reduction on the next sailing booked by the relevant passenger. In more positive itinerary news, just in time for this year's 4th of July celebrations, Holland America announced a very special 7-day cruise in 2026. It'll be called America's 250th Celebration Stars and Stripes Voyage. The cruise is set to depart on the 4th of July next year on board the Zuiderdam. The sailing will depart from Boston, and according to Holland America's press release, the ship will be in Boston Harbour to experience the 4th of July fireworks. The itinerary will include 2 stops in Canada, in St. John and in New Brunswick, before returning south to have a rare port of call in Norfolk, Virginia. There it will offer a range of shore excursions to many of the historic colonial sites in the region. After that, it will include an overnight stay in New York, and again, the heritage and history of the States will be very much celebrated with special shore excursion offerings, including trips to Ellis Island. The timing of the sail into New York is also intended to coincide with Sail Forth 250, the tall ships flotilla. So that will be an assembly of the largest tall ships in the world in New York at that point. The 7-day itinerary will then return to Boston. Reservations are now open for this very special itinerary, and no doubt spaces will fill up quite quickly, so if you intend to book, you better get moving on it. And finally, after Carnival Cruise Line receiving a lot of adverse publicity from their loyal Carnival cruisers over the past couple of weeks because of the introduction, or the proposed introduction, of their revamped loyalty program, they have this week made a move in a different direction that may actually please some cruisers. Carnival is changing from Pepsi products, which have been on board for the past 5 years, and indeed when they were introduced it caused a degree of controversy and displeasure, and they will be returning to serving Coca-Cola products. Now this is due to come into effect in the late summer. As of yet, no definitive schedule has been released as regards when it will be rolled out on what ships. Also, it's only going to take effect on ships sailing in North America. It is likely, however, that ships, once they return from, say, their European or Australia deployments, will change over to the Coca-Cola products once they're back sailing North American-based itineraries. So that wraps up the news from what has been a very busy week in the cruising space. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if I could ask that if you enjoyed this episode or found it useful, that you might consider hitting the like button. Please also consider subscribing to the channel so that you can be kept informed when there are more news updates or when there are vlogs of my cruise travels. For now, thank you for watching and have a good week.